The grocery bag split before I even crossed the threshold. A jar of marinara bursting across my brand new Subway, like a little crime scene. I stood frozen in the doorway of the 1920s bungalow I closed on last Friday. My address a secret, my keys carefully guarded, watching my mother and older sister move through my living room as if it were a staged open house. "Nora, you're early," Brianna said lightly. A tape measure pulled taut across the doorway to what I'd planned as my home office. Mom, Carol Quinn, queen of polite invasions, didn't even look guilty as she shifted my armchair 2 inches and frowned. "We were just visualizing," she said. "Family needs. How did you get in?" I heard my voice come out too calm, almost academic, the way it does when I'm trying not to panic. Mom tapped her purse. "I had a copy made. You left your keys on the console when I came to see the bathroom, remember? 3 days ago." I remembered. I also remember the years of Brianna first, the unasked favors, the quiet rescues. "This is my house," I said, every word deliberate. "Not ours. Mine." Brianna's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Nora, be serious. It's 3 bedrooms. The twins will take the blue room. Ellie needs the one with the bay window. You can keep the small one for your computer stuff." In the silence that followed, a lifetime of tiny compromises lined up like dominoes, and I felt the first one refuse to fall. Before I tell you what I did next, the call, the folder on the table, the first real boundary, tell me in the comments what you do, and subscribe if stories like this hit a little too close to home. I grew up in a small suburban town outside of Columbus, Ohio. On paper, my childhood looked comfortable, middle-class parents, a modest home with a fenced backyard, 2 daughters close enough in age to be playmates. But in reality, it always felt like there was a spotlight following my sister Brianna, while I lived in her shadow, holding the flashlight so she could shine brighter. Brianna was 3 years older, the golden child with honey blonde curls and a laugh that drew people in. Teachers adored her, coaches bent rules for her, and my parents made sure every dream she had was fueled, funded, and celebrated. I don't remember a time when I didn't feel like the understudy in my own family's play. When Brianna turned 11, she had a birthday bash that looked straight out of a sitcom. Clowns, a magician, a cotton candy machine in our backyard, and 20 screaming kids. When I turned 11, I had a store-bought chocolate sheet cake on our dining table, 2 paper candles sinking into the frosting, and my parents reminding me not to complain because money's tight right now. Money was never tight for Brianna's milestones. It wasn't just birthdays. At Christmas, she unwrapped the newest iPod while I got a knockoff MP3 player. When she was 16, Dad handed her the keys to a used but still shiny blue Honda Civic with a bow on top. When I was 16, I was told to get a job if you want wheels. So I did. I worked the closing shift at Dairy Queen all summer, coming home sticky with melted ice cream, saving every dollar for a rusted Corolla that coughed like a dying animal when it started. Sometimes I wondered if my parents even noticed the imbalance, or if it was so ingrained in our family dynamic, they assumed I'd never question it. When I was 14, Mom would gush over Brianna's soccer trophies while ignoring my perfect attendance certificates pinned crookedly on the fridge. "Sports build character," she'd say when I asked why my effort didn't matter. One memory sticks with me more than the others. I was in 10th grade, working on a science project I was proud of, building a working model of a volcano with a homemade chemical reaction. Dad walked by without a word. Then 10 minutes later came rushing back with Brianna's cheerleading uniform in his hands. "Don't forget this for practice, princess," he beamed. I remember the way my chest hollowed out, the eruption inside me far quieter than the volcano I built. By the time Brianna went off to college, the pattern was cemented. My parents co-signed her lease on a luxury apartment near campus and wired her grocery money weekly. I lived at home when it was my turn, working part-time while commuting to classes. Rent wasn't free. Not for me. They insisted I pay a token amount so you understand responsibility. A token amount that was exactly what I made waiting tables on weekends. I'd try to talk to my mom about it sometimes, but she'd brush me off. "Nora, you've always been more independent. You don't need as much help as Brianna." As if needing less meant deserving less. As if my quiet endurance was a license for neglect. The favoritism wasn't loud or flashy. It was in the subtle ways my parents spoke about us. Brianna's always been so social, so popular, they'd say at holiday dinners. When it came to me, their compliments sounded like faint apologies. Nora's reliable. She's steady. She'll always figure it out. It was like being praised for invisibility. Even family friends noticed. I remember Mrs. Reynolds from next door pulling me aside once when I was about 16. She whispered, "Don't let them make you small, sweetheart. You deserve the same as your sister." At the time, I brushed it off, embarrassed. But her words came back to me years later, echoing in my head when my parents tried to rearrange the furniture in my brand new house without permission. What made it sting most was that Brianna played her role perfectly. She basked in the attention, but she also leaned into the entitlement. She'd pout if she didn't get her way, or roll her eyes if anyone suggested she was spoiled. She had no shame in borrowing clothes from me and forgetting to return them. She once asked me to write her history essay while she went to a party, and when she got an A, she smirked and said, "See, you're good for something." Our mother encouraged it, telling me I should be proud to help my sister succeed. Dad would nod in agreement, adding, "Family sacrifices for family." But in reality, that meant I sacrificed, while Brianna collected the rewards. The resentment grew quietly, like mold under wallpaper, unseen but always spreading. By the time I graduated college, I had learned to keep my head down, work hard, and expect nothing. It wasn't just about money or gifts anymore. It was about the message that Brianna's happiness was worth more than mine. That's why buying the bungalow was monumental for me. Every saved paycheck, every late-night shift, every corner I cut. It all led to a house that was mine. Finally mine. It wasn't big or flashy, but it was proof that I could build something on my own terms. And maybe, deep down, I believed that for once my parents might look at me and see more than the reliable daughter in the background. But the moment I saw them standing in my living room, tape measure in hand, planning out which bedroom Brianna's kids would get, I realized the truth. They never stopped believing my life was negotiable. To them, my achievements were just stepping stones for Brianna's comfort. And for the first time in my life, I felt something shift. A hard, unshakable resolve rose up inside me. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the script anymore. Owning that bungalow wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of sacrifice, of clawing for independence in a family that never believed I deserved it. After high school, when Brianna left for her dream college with a full apartment set up by my parents, I stayed behind in Ohio. I attended a state school while juggling 3 part-time jobs. I worked mornings at a local diner, afternoons shelving books at the campus library, and nights tutoring high schoolers in math. Sleep was a luxury, meals often skipped, and weekends disappeared into endless shifts. Still, I kept going. Tuition was partly covered by loans, the rest by my own wages. Unlike Brianna, who never once had to check her bank balance before buying textbooks, I had to choose between replacing worn-out sneakers or paying the electric bill. More often than not, the bill won. One winter, during sophomore year, the heat in my basement room failed. My breath puffed white into the air as I studied wrapped in 2 coats, my laptop balanced on my knees. I asked Dad if he could help cover a repair, just a loan until my next paycheck. His response still stings. "If we help every time you struggle, you'll never learn to stand on your own." 2 days later, Brianna posted pictures of her brand new laptop, an upgrade gifted by our parents. Graduation came slowly for me. I had to take lighter course loads because of my work hours, so it took me 5 years instead of 4. But the pride I felt when I walked across that stage was unmatched. My family clapped politely, but most of their attention was on Brianna's latest pregnancy announcement, her 3rd child in 5 years. Once again, my milestone was overshadowed by hers. After college, I moved into a tiny studio apartment with paper-thin walls and neighbors who argued loudly through the night, while Brianna's family upgraded to a 2-story colonial in a desirable school district. Funded partly by my parents' loan, I saved every extra dollar, resisting every temptation. No vacations, no splurges. Every raise at work went directly into my house fund. At my job in marketing, I worked harder than anyone else in the office. I stayed late, volunteered for the tough projects, and climbed steadily. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I wanted a life where my worth wasn't measured by what I gave away, but by what I built for myself. The sacrifices weren't only financial. Socially, too, I gave things up. Friends invited me on trips, to dinners, to concerts. I declined more often than I accepted, knowing one night out could set me back a week of savings. I lived leaner than most 20-somethings, patching up clothes, learning to cook every meal at home, fixing what I could instead of replacing. But I had a vision. A small house with hardwood floors, enough space for a desk by a window, and a kitchen where I could finally breathe. And when I finally signed the mortgage papers on my bungalow, it felt like I had reached the summit of a mountain I'd been climbing alone for a decade. Contrast that with Brianna's life. When her car broke down, my parents handed her the keys to another one. When she decided to stay home after having her second child, Dad quietly helped with their mortgage. When she wanted a new fence, Mom and Dad paid half. She lived in a bubble where every problem had a soft landing. Meanwhile, I walked across metaphorical tightropes with no safety net. Every slip meant bruises. Every fall meant I had to claw my way back up alone. And yet, those struggles shaped me. They gave me grit, independence, and an appreciation for every small victory. Buying my home wasn't just about property. It was about finally carving out a corner of the world that was mine untouchable. Or so I thought. When my family stepped into that house with measuring tape and plans for Brianna's children, all I saw in their eyes was expectation. That same old assumption, Nora will give in. Nora will sacrifice. Nora always does. But they hadn't accounted for one thing, how much I'd already sacrificed to get there, and how unwilling I was to lose it. The confrontation didn't explode all at once. It built slowly, like storm clouds gathering until the thunder cracked. It began with a phone call from my father 2 days after I caught Mom and Brianna in my house. His voice boomed through the receiver before I could even say hello. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Nora? Your mother is in tears. Your sister is distraught. You've torn this family apart with your selfishness." Selfishness. That word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I almost laughed, but instead I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand, realizing that no matter what I did, they would twist it into betrayal. 3 days later, the official family dinner invitation came. A text from Dad. "We need to discuss a solution. Be at the house Sunday at 7. Your mother is making pot roast." It wasn't phrased as a request. It was an order. I told myself I wouldn't go, but that same stubborn thread of hope, the one that had whispered to me my whole life that maybe this time would be different, pulled me there anyway. When I walked into my parents' house that night, the smell of pot roast hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The table was set with Mom's best china, the kind she reserved for special occasions. My parents sat shoulder to shoulder, Brianna across from them, her husband Mark slipping into the seat beside her just as I arrived. An empty chair waited for me on the far side of the table, like I was a defendant standing trial. Mom's smile was tight, brittle around the edges. "Nora, sweetheart, we're so glad you came." Before I could sit, Dad slid a manila folder across the table. "We found the perfect solution," he said. Inside were printouts of listings, 5-bedroom homes, each circled with notes in Mom's handwriting. Perfect playroom, close to school, backyard for the kids. "These are lovely," I said slowly. "For Brianna and Mark." Dad cleared his throat. "For all of you. Together." My stomach twisted. "Excuse me. We've already talked to your bank," Mom added, her voice annoyingly casual, as if she were discussing a grocery list. "Transferring your mortgage to a bigger property is simpler than you'd think." "You what?" My pulse hammered in my ears. "Just preliminary discussions," Mom said, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Your furniture won't all fit, of course," Brianna chimed in. "But we could sell the extra pieces. We'll need space for the kids' bunk beds." And then Mark, the man who had barely looked at me in years, leaned back in his chair and said, "We'll take the left garage for my truck. Nora can park on the street." I gripped the edges of the table, the china rattling under my fists. They weren't just fantasizing. They were dividing up my home like it was a pie at Thanksgiving. "This is not happening," I said, my voice low, steady. Dad's eyes hardened. Refusing to help shows you don't care about this family. Think about your nieces and nephew, Mom pleaded, her voice trembling with her well-practiced tone of martyrdom. Children remember who was there for them. Brianna's eyes narrowed. What will people think, Nora? You living alone in all that space while we're cramped? It's shameful. That was the moment I saw it all clearly, like a puzzle snapping into focus. Every favor, every responsibility, every guilt trip. It had never been about family. It had been about control, about me being the permanent safety net, so Brianna never had to face the ground. Something inside me hardened. I pushed the folder back across the table. Watch me not help. The room went silent. My parents gaped at me as if I had spoken another language. I stood, placed my napkin neatly beside my untouched plate, and walked out. Their voices rose behind me, demanding, begging, threatening. I didn't look back. But the ambush didn't end there. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. Brianna's latest Facebook post. A picture of her 3 kids crammed onto their pull-out sofa. Faces exaggerated in cartoonish pouts. The caption, "When selfish family members abandon you, children suffer. Family first, unless you're Nora, apparently." Comments poured in. Friends of hers calling me heartless. Church ladies promising to pray for my hardened heart. Even my 3rd-grade teacher chimed in, scolding me for wasting space. I wanted to defend myself, but I knew better. It would be like spitting into the wind. Then came the escalation. A knock at my door revealed Pastor Williams, Bible tucked under his arm, telling me he was concerned about my soul. My parents had shown him photos of my house, and spun their tale of my selfishness. I refused to open the door. My voice trembled, but I said firmly, "Please respect my privacy." For the first time in my life, I slammed a door on someone who came carrying my parents' message. But they didn't stop. A week later, I learned my mortgage company had been contacted. My parents, pretending to be me, asked for statements to be redirected to their address. If I hadn't called to check on a missing bill, I might never have known. Every day became a new violation. Fake reports to my homeowners association. Gossip spreading like wildfire. It was more than intrusion, it was warfare. And then came the night I pulled into my driveway and saw Brianna's SUV parked outside. Through the front window, shadows moved. They were inside again. This time I didn't hesitate. I called the police from my car. When the officer arrived, Mom stepped onto my porch, her voice rising to a wail. "How could you call the police on your own blood?" I showed the officer my phone, security footage of them using a copy key to let themselves in. For the first time in my life, I didn't cower under their outrage. "I don't care what people think," I said evenly. "I care what I think. And this ends tonight." The officer escorted them out. The neighbors watched from behind curtains as my family retreated, their faces twisted with indignation. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the war they were prepared to wage against me. That night, after the police escorted them off my porch, I sat alone in the bungalow that had once felt like a sanctuary. The silence pressed heavy against the walls, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I stared at the darkened window, half expecting them to reappear, to bang on the glass until I gave in. My hands shook as I tried to scrub marinara stains that never seemed to fade from the grout lines. Every trace of red reminded me of that first violation. My home no longer mine. My independence treated like an optional gift. Exhaustion gnawed at me, but sleep refused to come. Every creak in the house jolted me awake, my mind racing with possibilities. What if they tried again? What if they changed the locks while I was at work? What if they went further? Something I couldn't undo. The betrayal wasn't just about a key or a mortgage. It was the gut-deep realization that my family, my own blood, saw me as nothing more than a resource to be harvested. To them, my sacrifices were invisible, my boundaries irrelevant. I was the reliable one, the one who always gives in. And now that I refused, they were willing to scorch the earth to break me back into place. I walked through the bungalow at 3 a.m, barefoot, the wooden floors cold under my soles. Every corner of the house had been chosen carefully. every wall painted with my own money and effort. Yet instead of joy, I felt the weight of violation. It was as if their fingerprints were everywhere, smudging the life I had built. At my desk, I pulled out the family photo I kept tucked in a drawer. Mom, Dad, Brianna, her husband Mark, the kids, and me off to the side, smiling a practice smile. I stared at it until the smile blurred, until the edges of my own face seemed to disappear. That's how I had always existed, in the margins. Hot tears slid down my cheeks, blurring my vision. I hated that I still cried for them, still longed for their approval even after everything. I hated that part of me still asked, why can't they love me enough to just let me be? For days, the humiliation followed me everywhere. At work, whispers seemed sharper. Colleagues glancing at me with pity after Brianna's Facebook posts made the rounds in town. At the grocery store, I overheard two women clucking their tongues. Poor Brianna, crammed in a house with 3 kids, while her sister hogs a whole bungalow. Some people are just selfish. Selfish. The word again. It haunted me like a ghost. Every time I tried to defend myself, the words caught in my throat. How could I explain years of sacrifices no one saw? How could I prove to the world that I wasn't cruel, just tired of being erased? Nights stretched long and sleepless. I installed cameras, double-checked locks, saved every voicemail and text like evidence in a case I never asked to fight. My home, my dream, had become a fortress. But instead of feeling secure, I felt trapped, my peace shredded by paranoia and grief. The loneliness cut deepest. Friends offered support, but none of them knew what it was like to stand against your own family. To know that the people meant to protect you had turned into predators, circling your happiness. I wanted to scream, to tear down every accusation and lie. But mostly, I wanted to stop hurting. I wanted the gnawing ache in my chest, the humiliation, the fear, the hollow echo of betrayal, to finally quiet down. And somewhere beneath the despair, a fragile ember burned. If I was going to survive this, not just endure it, but reclaim what was mine, I had to turn that ember into fire. The breaking point came the day my boss called me into her office. I braced myself for the worst. Another story about my family showing up. Another embarrassing scene. Instead, she closed the door gently and slid her phone across the desk. On the screen was Brianna's newest stunt, a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Help My Children Have a Home." There it was, my photo, my house, and a sob story about how I had abandoned them, leaving her children homeless. Donations had already begun trickling in. My boss's voice was calm but firm. "Nora, you don't deserve this. What do you need from me?" Something inside me clicked. For weeks, I had been drowning in humiliation, but in that moment, I felt something sharper, clearer, resolve. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were stealing my narrative, rewriting me as the villain. And I refused to let them win. That night, I gathered everything. Mortgage statements showing every payment I made alone. Rent checks from college years when my parents charged me while funding Brianna's apartment. Photos of security footage, Mom trying keys at my door, Brianna peering through windows. Screenshots of texts, voicemails, the GoFundMe page. Piece by piece, I built a case file thicker than a law textbook. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Dave, a college friend turned family lawyer. He listened patiently as I explained everything, then said words that felt like oxygen. "We'll send a cease and desist, and if they keep pushing, we'll file for harassment." The second call was to a realtor. "What's the market like for a 3-bedroom bungalow?" I asked. Within a week, the house was staged and photographed. By the following Monday, it was on the market. Offers already rolling in above asking price. But I wasn't running away. Not this time. I had a plan. 3 nights later, my parents summoned me to a family meeting. Their living room was full, extended relatives, even grandma, sitting stiffly with folded hands. The setup was obvious. An audience for my public shaming. The final push to make me surrender. Dad started, his voice booming with false authority. "Nora, we've all discussed this. The house is too big for you. The fair solution is for Brianna's family to move in. You can stay, of course, but it will be their home." Mom nodded dramatically, clutching a tissue. Think of your nieces and nephew. Family comes first. For once, I didn't tremble. I opened a folder I had brought and spread the documents across the coffee table. No, here's the truth. I handed Grandma a copy of the rent checks I'd written during college, lined up next to Brianna's fully funded tuition and apartment receipts. Her eyes widened. You made her pay rent while paying for Brianna's housing? It built character, Dad snapped, but his voice wavered. I slid over photos of Brianna trying to force my locks, Mom sneaking around my porch. I hit play on Dad's voicemail where he accidentally admitted, we had it all planned out. We were going to move in, whether you liked it or not. The room fell into stunned silence. This isn't family helping family, I said, my voice steady. This is exploitation. And it ends now. The final blow came when I pulled out the real estate listing. The bright red for sale banner stamped across photos of my bungalow. The house is sold. I've accepted a new position in Denver. I'm leaving next month. Brianna shrieked. But what about us? Where are we supposed to go? I met her eyes. Back to your own home. Like everyone else. For the first time in my life, the power shifted. My parents' faces drained of color as extended family murmured in shock, some openly disapproving. Their perfect facade cracked under the weight of documented truth. The next day, my realtor called. We've got a cash offer, $25,000 over asking, 30-day close. I didn't hesitate. Accept it. When Mom tried one last guilt-ridden visit, I met her at the door with a cease and desist letter in hand. This isn't a request, I said quietly. Any further interference will be handled legally. For once, she had no words. As moving day approached, I felt lighter than I ever had. Not because I was leaving a house, but because I was leaving a lifetime of manipulation. They had counted on me, always giving in. Instead, I had turned every attempt to control me into evidence of their betrayal, and I walked away stronger. And the plot twist, once the house sold, word spread about everything they had done. Neighbors, family friends, even church members began questioning their story. The sympathy Brianna had milked online evaporated, replaced with whispers of, maybe Nora was right all along. For once, I wasn't the one in the margins. I was the one holding the pen. 1 year later, I wake up in a sunlit Denver apartment that smells faintly of fresh paint and freedom. The walls are decorated with photos I chose. Me on a mountain trail, me holding the keys to this new place, me surrounded by friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can give. Not a single picture features my parents or Brianna. For the first time, I don't feel guilty about that. My life isn't missing pieces, it's finally whole. As I sip coffee by the window, I glance at the single key hanging on its hook. Mine and mine alone. A reminder that boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. And while I don't know if reconciliation will ever be possible, I do know this. I'll never again let anyone decide my worth for me. So I'll ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have fought or walked away sooner? Tell me below, and don't forget to subscribe for more